Oh, that'll just, it should just disappear.
This can be minimized, right?
Yeah.
Right. Good.
You ready?
Whenever you want.
Yeah. Great. Well, very nice to see so many new faces. Thank you for coming. It looks like you're all people who see. Is that correct? Or not? Everyone, but most of you. Oh, that's very good. We've been trying very hard in the last few months to reactivate our connections with people who see. They used to be quite active in class and in the Centre for Latin American Travel Studies, but then there was a couple of years where it kind of all that disappeared slightly, probably during COVID. So it's good to reactivate the links. And thanks to Nuno for agreeing to do the seminar as part of that process of activation. And we're also having, as you probably don't know, we're having a kind of social event in the sandbar after this seminar. So you're very welcome, and we'll provide some pizzas, probably enough for everybody. I should think this is not happening to everybody. Yeah? Anyway, so it's a great pleasure to welcome Nuno Pinto, who is in the Department of Urban Planning,
Property, and Environmental Management.
At the university here. He got his PhD in Barcelona from School of Architecture. He's also a chartered civil engineer in the University of Coimbra in Portugal. He's also worked in the University of Coimbra and in the Polytechnic Institute of Lleida in Portugal. So today he's going to talk about better decision support for better urban governance and how to support decision making with different stakeholders. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter, for the invitation. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the invitation again. It's good to be here again, and it's good to see so many people around. So there's traction going. As Peter said, I'm presenting some work I've been doing in some Latin American countries under this decision support area for whatever urban governance you may think. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm a civil engineer by background. Because in Portugal, we don't have planners like here. We have architects and civil engineers. We do infrastructure and regional planning and strategic planning. But I was brought up in a spatial and transport planning group, so very quantitative. So I'm really not only have an engineering background, but I'm really quantitative, and I do mainly spatial analysis, urban modeling, systems dynamics, and stuff. When I came here in my interview, they asked, "Oh, by the way, how long do I have? How long do I have?"
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Okay.
45,
yeah. I was asked in my interview, why the hell do our students need a person like you? Because this is a traditional social science, town and country planning, and they didn't want some so quantitative as I end up being. Now we are many of us, so things are changing a bit. With this background and also having worked in architecture, well, in urban planning, in the School of Architecture with lots of architects, and my being something that could be called theoretical quantitative geography, modeling stuff. One of the things that interests me very much is try to bridge the gap between discourses, technical discourses of architects, planners, geographers, economists, and all these people who work in urban topics. So I'm very interested in many aspects of this very complex system, which is urban in the cities. And the other thing is I'm interested in methods more than the problems. I like the problems, I like to know about the problems, but the methods to address these problems and to qualify a bit the processes is central. That's why I'm now focusing increasingly more on this decision support thing. And this is part of work is happening in South America, but also here in the UK and other countries through both research projects, small and big, and also PhD research. Some of my PhD students are here, so most likely to come here to the, which is a good sign. All of them linked to Latin America, right? Two Latin American students and one working in Latin America, which is quite good. So I'll start, and first I'll talk about the motivation of this. As I said, this background, my background leads to this kind of thing, but I'll give some examples, right? This is Portugal, Bandeira, in the metropolitan area of Lisbon, south to it. They connect to Lisbon by boats, right? Daily, hourly boats or something. And my family, well, part of my wife's family is nearby, so I go there very frequently. And this is a good example of how decision making is to some extent wrongly made, right? And not fully supported. This is an interesting rail, bus and boat interface. And historically, you can see the old station with the train lines here, and lots of train lines, but it's also a train yard, the biggest train yard in the country. Portugal is a post-EU country, right? So there's lots of money coming for infrastructure. And for some reason, there was money to invest in this transport infrastructure here. And instead of refurbishing the lovely 1970 building or something, and improving it and modernizing it, no, someone decided to scrap the building and build a brand new kind of thing, which is what? 30 meters closer or something to the train. Doesn't save much time, so it could be there. And it's awful because it's not covered, and for those who don't know, it rains more in Portugal than it rains here. So it's very bad to be here in the winter. So everything is wrong with this kind of investment. And you could argue, we have to think the other way, it's just improvements. Why did you? So evidence should indicate for several reasons: architectural reasons, existing infrastructure, the fact that you'll be closer to, you save more space for other users, etc. Let's go there. No, they decide to build here. And that's common to many countries, right? White elephants, right? The famous football stadiums. This is a Portugal Euro 2004 stadium in Aveiro, which is now used once a time because the club went to third division or something. So they play just the Super Cup over there. And there are talks, sorry, this is automatic and I don't like it. There are talks about demolishing it, right? Because it is too expensive for the local authority to maintain. Or Ciudad Real in Spain airport, which was built also because of regional national politics and lots of money involved. And the airport is not operating, there's no flights going there. Or Romania's government's palace from Ceausescu's times, or so this is not exclusive of, say, Southern European countries, or Latin countries sometimes linked to this mismanagement of public funds. This is Montreal in Canada, and the Mirabel airport, the brand new airport built outside Montreal, was never really used and abandoned after they demolished even the terminal and everything here. And it's a massive infrastructure. So we can go on and on about these white elephants. And the issue in the end is there's a detachment. We know this as citizens between evidence that informs decision making and the decisions in many, many, many cases, right? This is kind of the motivation for it. And it starts already with education, and in general terms, different careers associated with public administration, planning, public policy, etc. They have a chronic deficit on, sorry, I'm not sure why this is automated, but a chronic deficit on decision science and methods, right? For several reasons. In UK, for example, it might be the social science nature of country planning that never evolved. For example, in UK, we still have separated transport and spatial planning, which majority of the countries they integrate because they are integrated stuff. And because of that, because also, I don't know, legacy issues or reasons or other reasons, which I don't fully encapsulate or understand yet, there's this deficit, right? And then this is common to developed countries, developing countries, poor, rich, more legal, more less legal, etc. And this is something we need to do. And then the professional practice in this field. I'm not sure if crystallize is the right word in English, but surely it is in Portuguese. To crystallize, right? One graduates from the school of whatever, goes to work on a local authority. Can I?
Yeah, if you are happy with that, you and that kind of look at the recording that we are making.
I think maybe deny.
Yeah.
Deny? Right, okay.
You want to be in control of what's
Right, okay.
You know, I'm letting them in, it's just that it takes a while for that, so they
Okay.
try to,
Right.
what's happening, I will do that, yeah. So
Right.
don't worry about that, I'll
Right.
just focus on the
Let me-
dog, and I will keep an eye on them.
All right, okay. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's cutting it. Anyway, the professional practice in this tends to crystallize, if that's the word, what we learn in school, right? And then people are around those practices, and there are moving parts, technical capacity of all agencies, small local authority to a big governmental agency, increasingly more so in the recent times, where there's this disinvestment in public management across all countries. Financial capacities are a problem, priorities in public agendas, deficit of decision-making protocols. I can tell you important agencies in this country have still very archaic decision methods, making processes, and also siloed areas, which in urban is quite a problem, because urban is about integrating multiple systems within the city. And this, I argue that this is the joint responsibility of everyone. So us, an education stage and professional practice afterwards, right? Right. So this issue of literacy and decision support is a big thing. And now in the UK is leading this discussion, but other countries are talking about this digitalization of everything, and digitization of planning. And there's this, sorry for this, I don't know what's happening here, but there's this digital planning task force led by some very important academics in the country, plus practitioners, that they come with this interesting report, discussed in this report last year, about what digitization is. And it's interesting that in these principles, the one that is close to including all agencies, this one, investing in digital planning and forging an ecosystem between planning, research, practice, education, lifelong learning, they don't talk about the user. And it's interesting, because I would expect them to talk. I know the people who did this, and none of these principles really explicitly talk. Although in the report, it's very clear that the citizens are there. In this particular scheme, they don't, and this is the closest one. Anyway, just to put into context, they did a lot of surveys for departmental local authorities, and they're talking about use of tools. And again, I'm talking about this as a broad term topic for what I want to introduce a bit later. And sorry, many of these known tools like geographical information systems or web mapping are already widely used, but some more sophisticated stuff that are not that sophisticated. We talked about this for 20 years at least, like 3D modeling of VR or machine learning and AI, which is a very broad term, as you know, but it's already being used for many areas, are not yet commonly used. Why not? One traditional reason in public administration is there's no money, and the government should pay for it. Which is common to, say, developed countries and developing countries. Every local authority, smaller agencies need more resources, and they don't know how to pay. They depend on subsidies from central governments. Interestingly enough, they go for the reasons various to do digital planning, and again, this is common to decision making. And the second big reason is insufficient digital skills among planners, and this translates also into insufficient knowledge of methods, of knowledge itself, of decision-making tools and methods to use. And this is very important, because they say that how digital planning tools are used in your organization. Public engagement is one of the biggest reasons. So these skills that these technical people should have need to be developed further. So again, in 2013, I proposed, when I was interviewed, I proposed a course. At the time, I didn't have generic decision support system. Only 6 years later, I was allowed to create it, right? And finally, we have this, sorry for this, digital planning decision support systems, which is for several programs: MSc planning, urban regeneration and development, global urban development planning, right? The one that deals with development in the global south, data science, urban analytics. Is this an automatic?
It must be somehow built into the.
Because I never put on my slides. I don't have this.
Yeah.
No, I don't have.
I can keep an eye on that.
No, wait. No, I'll do it. I'll keep here, right? So if it's as I say, planning, GDP, URD, data science, and year 4 integrated master in planning. So there's a lot of different people that deal with urban policy planning that are being exposed now, introduced to these concepts of decision making. And this is part of what I'm presenting today, this agenda that I call Better Decision Support for Better Urban Governance, which has a cool acronym, BETS for bug. But in these days, after we've been talking about this plague of bed bugs, right, I might change it for something in Latin or something. I'm not sure. I'm trying still a good acronym. But anyway, for now is this, right? And this is an agenda in which I engage with I present the research I'm doing with stakeholders of all sorts. The one that's called more fundamental research for decision. So things I do myself on projects with PhD students, and also the teaching side of it, where I have the course. I have also some mentoring that I'm trying to provide to other colleagues across other universities who want to factor this into their curriculum. Right. This might have even been, this is an argument that probably is not getting there, right? But me and some colleagues, both in Brazil and here, we argue that perhaps the pandemic is helping this. Because remember yourselves, in the pandemic, since day one, we have been exposed to the curve, the R, all these little decision tools that you're bombarding us saying, oh, the R is ever whatever, let's do this, or the curve is flattening, let's do that, and so on and so forth. So we argue that somehow the public is more aware of decision support, and perhaps this is an opportunity for us to go deeper into it, right? And this finally, to finalize this introduction, this is particularly important in these times of, attack of the evidence-based approach to things, right? Two interesting books, How to Lie with Statistics, How to Lie with Maps. You all know this. You can play with statistics as you want, right? They are like toothbrushes. Each one of us has their own, so you can do whatever you want and tell your story. But under, you remember, the Britain is fed up of experts in 2016, or the funny one for me is Trump. Remember this, when Trump tweeted on his Twitter, official Twitter, that Alabama was safe because of his administration from the Hurricane Dorian. And the evidence showed that this is National Met Office, right? That never Alabama will be hit and someone draws a little marker gate or pen gate or something, right? Which is cool because this is a federal crime. Tampering with federal evidence is a crime. It would be interesting if he would be arrested because of this crime and not the other. Right? But coming to Latin America, Brazil, you might remember this, the Bolsonaro administration sacking, I forgot his name, José Reis, the INPE professor, who is now Minister of Science in Brazil. Right? Because it was just showing evidence that after Bolsonaro came, the pace of deforestation doubled. And also, I was there sometime when they were preparing the census 2020, and the administration was defunding the census on one hand, and they took out 8 questions of the questionnaire for 2020, which include poverty, ethnicity, and I think wealth or something like this, which would give an image of Brazil in 2020 that very likely was nothing compared with what we have. So I tell my students, being undergraduate, master, or the technical people I meet in some of the things, I would present some photos, you have to have some nerve, how should I say, have to hold your nerve, right? You have to be cold-blooded to resist these attacks, which I can tell you happen in not only in this, let's call it semi-crazy context, but also in traditional public administration, where technical people are called and say the results are not that good. Why don't you run again the model, or you reassess your spreadsheet? And so this is an important thing, right? Having all this in mind, one of the lines that I'm trying to look at decision support thing is how community groups think, also how institutions think, but very interested in how community groups think, right? And Brazil is a good example for this, because in Brazil, the bottom-up colectivos, I assume everyone understands a bit of Portuguese and Spanish in the room. So the colectivos, right? The bottom-up groups, they really exploded in number and areas of activity since 2013, 2014. And they got out of the traditional social arena they were, and they come from things like transport, right? And public spaces and architecture and stuff, right, to the city. And that open a possibility for us to go and see what are they doing, right? That's what I'll be presenting here, right? Two definitions of colectivos here, right? And I think you might know this very well from other types of studies. But these collectives are a generic name for something that could be highly organized with lots of institutional knowledge and capacity and even funding for some, or could be a family of two, right? Working on something on the neighborhood and engaging with the community. And so this range of possibilities is very, very interesting because all of them have a decision-making process. I usually say to the students, right? Everyone here in the room has a decision-making process for everything they do every day. How to go home, what movie to see tonight, or should I buy a TV set or something? And so this is not new for the individual, and it's not new then for the groups of individuals that constitute a community group, right? And so we decided, I partnered with colleagues in Brazil University, a group of public policies. They have a laboratory called, never know the name, it's Laboratory for Democracy and Activism, or Studies or something. They are all from the public policy kind of thing. They are within the management school, mainly, public management school. And also colleagues from the FGV in São Paulo, right? And this is exploratory at this stage. And I'm now trying to consolidate into something to fetch more money to make it a wider study with more collective. Again, the context, they are quite known in Brazil after the transition to democracy. Can we call it this? After democracy came, right? It's a transition. I'm Portuguese, we did a revolution, so that's slightly different from one to the other. They became visible in the international media with the 2013-14 protests of affordable transport and the Pass Week movement, right? I think it's one of the most well-known things. When Brazil was experiencing a balanced period of apparent growth with decreasing levels of inequality. So this was really something. They have, I'm not sure if this is a law, or they have in Brazil a legal regulatory context for collective and public participation to happen, right? In what they call the social state interfaces of everything in every domain and at every scale, from municipal to federal. And this creates a good context for us to go there and meet these people. With the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff, there was this watering down of this context, and this decree here extends right 700 forums of public participation. This is already Bolsonaro's administration time, and they were really trying to cut down the capacity of the country to have an engaged kind of policy design. And so this is quite important. So a reorganization of the stakeholders is happening to some extent. Networking is increasingly more important, right? As you see in the mid, when you ask collectives, what's the most important thing you have in your mind? We need to have tools to engage with other groups to gain capacity and critical mass. It's interesting to see. And that's it go. So what we did was in a kind of arbitrary decision, right? We decided to go to analyze collectives in Brasilia and São Paulo metropolitan regions. In Brasilia, I was interested already because of previous visits and all on collectives dealing with public space and transport, right? For those who, everyone knows Brasilia. Brasilia, many of us, perhaps not here, but the majority of people think Brasilia is a beautiful modernist city. It's not just. Is much more than that's 300,000 people only of 4.5 million or something in this last massive, unique metropolitan area that is really complex, and mobility is a big thing, right? Because the city was not designed for proper mobility, all these problems. And urban space is also a big thing because the city was designed with some principles of public space that were then changed by the natural use of the city. In São Paulo, also, there's interesting aspects of urban agriculture and food security, right? And there's lots of the municipality and the metropolitan region municipalities are very engaged with local groups on working in food security and urban agriculture. So first we started looking at these two domains, into these two geographical units, let's try to fetch as many collectives we could, and we reached, I don't know, 40 collectives or something on both sides. And so we initially started with some mapping, what are they doing, social media, previous studies in repositories of both units, to see if there are, Brazil, lots of MSc dissertations on the field. And then we try to classify their activities, right, domain of activities, starting of activities, original areas of intervention, etc. Engagement, level of engagement of both communities, of where they operate, society at large, public powers. One thing that really interests me, it's this kind of decision support knowledge will help them engage better, have a better voice with the institutional entities rather than just other collectives, because that's where they start having a voice in decision, or it's one way to go. Also territories where they intervene. We did a survey using Qualtrics from Manchester. Was designed for smartphones. It was interesting specifically because, as you know, they access things by WhatsApp. We disseminated WhatsApp much more than anything. And we got 7 collectives in the end that fully responded, and 13 collectives in São Paulo, and 7 in Brazil. The context for public space and mobility, right? In Brazil, high spatial inequalities and infrastructure and urbanization, high socioeconomic inequalities, many types of land disputes, which is Brazil is unique in Brazil because it's publicly owned land, but there's this grilagem, kind of taking off public land to sell privately. And transport system design and for and serving mobility by private car, right? Public services are not absent, but they are very bad. Whereas São Paulo was urban agriculture and peripheral São Paulo location, so focused on social protection, subsistence agriculture. This happened during COVID. So imagine we're seeing people really were delivering locally cropped foods to the local communities, which was quite interesting. And a new drives into 2000s for municipal public work, public policy from the sector. I forgot the name, but they have even they have this mapping service that you can access all the urban and agricultural groups in São Paulo, what they are producing, for the public policy as food for the schools, for example. You can know this. It's very, very, very developed. Activity of collectives in Brazilian network of collectives and stakeholders include several collectives with diverse geographical nature, from local. The ones I will show you is of Setor Comercial Sul, which is pretty much one small block of the city, to Nossa Brasília, which is a massive collective looking at everything, ranging up to the federal scale, but focus on the local activities, right to city, urban sustainable mobility, and road safety, participation in some institutional forums. So in Brazil, it's slightly different from other cities in the sense that they are so close to the government, and the university is very close to the government because people in the postgraduate programs, many of them work in the federal government or the national or the federal or the district federal DF government, right? The GDF, and which makes them very close to decision-making process, which is better. In São Paulo, public organization networks are very important. Subsistence agriculture is very important. A lot of, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not. There's a feminist drive to the activities that are happening in São Paulo. Some regional differentiation, right? East, south, and north of São Paulo, which is quite cool. São Paulo is there, right? 25, 22 million people. So you have to find this differentiation. And also some capacity of participation. So we were analyzing this and we found the logic of networking, which is quite important. A strong engagement and commitment and strong connection with communities they emerge from. In São Paulo, the community groups, one of them is a family in Suzano, the industrial municipality of the metropolitan region, and they are linked to the local schools and local community. In Brazil, it's a bunch of kids, really, young kids, who are engaging with homeless people in the block and doing a really interesting work. A very big diversity of needs, recurring reference to the need for tools for liaising with other stakeholders, and fragmentations about the barriers and bottlenecks. There's no single common barrier, funding, other than networking. Right? But that's not a barrier. That's an aspiration more than many things. So what we did, we engaged with collectives, 4 initially, 1 dropped, 1 in Brasília, no sector, 2 in São Paulo, Armazém do Campo, which is the commercial branch of Movimento Sem Terra, right? And Instituto Agroterra, the family-run thing in Suzano, right? We designed a method, we co-designed with them in meetings, a methodology in which they will tell us what are their needs for decision. After we had discussions analyzing their structure, we would inquire about possible interest in incorporating decision-making on one of their activities only. The collective team will identify one activity or project and they will inform us about this. We will meet the collective and discuss methodological application aspects of a particular approach, not several, but one for one particular problem. We will then build up this decision support method and approach, and we'll then have with them a workshop in which they would apply the method. They will tell us what they see as what they perceive as useful, the usefulness of the method. They'll tell us whatever about it, right? So we did this. And the 3, anyway, very quickly, the 3, Nuno Sector is a local group formed by young activists for multiple events. So they organize the Brazilian Carnival now, but they also build the public toilet for the public bathrooms for the homeless people in Setor Comercial Sul. And so they have a huge amount of projects. They operate in the public space, medium institutional capacity, growing engagement with stakeholders, very low to medium budget. Armazém do Campo is not low and medium budget, it's a big budget. They are a big operation, they have shops now in pretty much all the big cities in Brazil. It's a Movimento Sem Terra. It's an interesting, so it's a retailing of agricultural food products by members of MST. Very high institutional capacity because they emanate from MST. They are very organized. They really have a set of criteria to sell their products. It's for the most in need people, but also for the people, the population sectors that vote on their causes. So it's interesting to know how they want to sell the thing. Very high engagement with stakeholders through MST, right? And finally, the Agroterra Institute is a family, as I said, family-run little institute because they gain institutional. So there's a law, I don't see it fully, but you can organize in a group and acquire the institute status that gives you access to endowments or other funding, right? Or you can apply to calls, public funding calls. Community scale for composting. This is a family that is doing composting in the local community using schools as the areas to compost the thing. Low capacity, very growing, but very low, very low budget, right? And I think I have some. Oh, and then decision support. The problem for Nuno Sector was assessment of their strategic plan. We proposed a multi-criteria analysis with a simple analytical process. Sounds complex, but it's very simple. Okay, it's really simple. No experience in the thing. We would work with the leadership team, and we had 6 participants in the end, and half of them because there was a COVID outbreak, and half of the team couldn't come. In São Paulo, we are assessing the possible location of a hypothetical network of neighborhood shops within São Paulo. So they have one shop in Barra Funda, one neighborhood. They would like to create more shops here and there to reach out to their target population. Multi-criteria analysis, simple method. No experience. We used their leadership team from São Paulo, but there were people coming from Belo Horizonte for the meeting. And have 6 participants, and here was more complex. We were again using, so they want to create a new network at municipal scale of composting centers. We use a multi-criteria analysis, but we couple it with facility location approaches to say where to put these centers to maximize their use, etc. We brought here the leadership team, but then we had this huge seminar with 40 people from the local authority, municipality, with secretaries. Secretaries are the councillors that lead domains, private companies, activists, politicians. We have nearly 30 people, right? We organize these workshops. Brasília, you see, everyone in past. Armazém do Campo, and the bigger auditorium for Agroterra. I had a step-by-step method. They knew that method, but they never applied. I had a step-by-step method, and I was facilitating. They were doing it, step 1, step 2, I'll congregate, I'll disseminate again, and they would be doing things, right? It was quite engaging. Really, all the 3 workshops were really, really live. In the end, people were quite satisfied with the purpose. And what did they do? Well, they decided that we first established very clearly what the problem was, the one that I described before. Then they decided on criteria with a full description where necessary, the units of measure, the range of values. And then we applied using a online page that everyone communicates, and then I disseminate it again, and each one of them would vote on their cell phones the weight of the criteria. And we end up with a weighted from all the participants and all the criteria. We will end up with a weighted value for each of the criteria that then gives us a final value between 2 or more alternatives. That's what we're doing, right? We did the thing for Nuno Pinto. Here we have interesting criteria, political criteria, activist criteria, coupled with economics, right? The cost of this, but also the number of people that are, I don't know, of poor backgrounds that can come to us, things like this. Mixing analysis of potential. This was demonstrative, right? Mixing analysis of voting patterns, for example, with economic things. It's quite cool. Here was the same kind of thing, but coupling with some maps where they would have composting centers where to locate and the generators, etc. So all of this was quite receptive, quite useful, and we ran a post-workshop survey, which had out of what? Nearly 50 people who participated. We only had 13 responses. That's the problem of this, because these were difficult times for them in terms of their organization, and the time they have to dedicate to this was cool. Anyway, some participants failed to register their participation, only 13 provided. DS methods in the workshop was a novelty for them. One of the guys in São Paulo came from Belo Horizonte, 19 hours on the coach overnight, and he was leaving that 19 hours against Belo Horizonte. He was not understanding anything, and I could feel his anxiety. Where are we going? In the moment we had the solution, this one was better than this. I was afraid he would jump and punch me in the face, right? It made me lose 2 days of my life for this. But in the end, I was the first one to say that although we didn't have this before and couldn't understand all the components, this was exactly what they need to go to the political leadership of MST and say, we have an approach here, we need the investment, can we have the resources? So although it was a novelty, they incorporated this very well. How easy it was split, because some people considered it very difficult. Again, it was on-the-fly exercise for people of different technical backgrounds, capacities, right? And although it's a very simple method, of course, if it's in the first go, it's very difficult. I already followed up with MST, so I was there this July, and we are now stepping up to provide them a tool that they can operate themselves. And the same with Nuno Pinto in Brazil. We are also creating a little tool, which is an Excel spreadsheet and some guidance for them to do it themselves every time they want to rethink their strategic plan. Conscious of time, more training is needed. The general comments. Collectives should benefit from incorporation of more DS knowledge. If I could do a better work, a calmer work with them to teach them this will probably be okay. The lack of DS knowledge and methods is widespread, and capacitation of these areas would benefit a lot. That's the thing that people tell me. For example, when with MST, because I met high-ranked MST officials that comes from their schools. You know, MST has these national schools of activism and policy, and they were saying this would be something we could incorporate in our training, right, for their operation. And that's what I'm doing with them now. And I'm also seeking more robust funding, right, to expand this to say a good sample of other collectives outside Brazil and São Paulo, so in other key strategic cities, in other ranges of things. So this was a pilot, but with good results. They are enthusiastic, and we are following up. The Brazilian context is very good for this approach, bottom-up community approach, because they really have a context that allows us to do this. Oh, God. I'm learning with them. One of the ideas is to capture this and incorporate this in my teaching and also research, right? But in the teaching that I'm teaching to future graduates, so they understand better how they can engage better with this. And there's a big potential to approach these collectives. They're all willing to collaborate, and that's it. That's Brazil, right? 5 minutes?
Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's quicker now. In Guadalajara, Mexico is the opposite. It's a top-down perspective, right? Guadalajara is a 5 million people regional. Sorry? 6 already, yeah, good. And they have something called the IME plan, which is the Metropolitan Institute of Planning. And there's a big trust from the northern local authorities with this IME plan. It's a very unbalanced metropolitan area. The 2 top income local authorities of Mexico and very poor ones on the other side. And yet all of them trust very well IME plan. IME plan has this model segmento de evaluação de desenvolvimento metropolitano, which is a tool in which you throw a project, a local project, and you assess how metropolitan gain, how much metropolitan gains you will have, something like this. That makes all the authorities to come and try to say, we invest in this together or not, right? And the work there is a bit interrupted because we had a research assistant who was in Germany, and my colleague was in Colegio de Jalisco, right? And it was difficult, but we mapped already 2 of these. It's a very complex system already, okay? But they have these mesas de gestión, which are forums of, and we engage with 2 of them, and I'm trying to progress. So it's a top-down perspective there. Well, in Guayaquil, this is very recent. We did something very on the fly too. The local authority, the Alcalderia. This is Guayaquil, as you might know. In this corner, there's Mont Sinaí. Mont Sinaí is one of the most deprived neighborhoods or cities. This is 600,000 people, right? It's bigger than Lisbon in population, and it's very deprived. And the local authority doesn't fully enter here for public management, right? They are scared because El Nino could be the worst El Nino ever. So all the indicators show that. And this current local government was elected recently, says that previous government didn't prepare anything. So they say they might be in for thousands of deaths in Guayaquil alone this winter, right? When El Nino hits. So we tried to do an exercise in which I had local technical people from the local authority from several departments. They all use the GeoSurvey to place locally in Mont Sinaí physical interventions or wider policies, and all of them were described, and we did the multi-criteria decision analysis, and we got something. And they said, this is good, let's do it now for real. It was a weird meeting because 8 people in the meeting, and then the guy sees the call, oh, I have to go, but the colleague of mine is coming, so he go away, and the colleague from the same department of city. So I couldn't really follow up the structure, but that's how it is. To finalize, this is another thing, simulation models in which I have the simulator designed by a friend of mine, Portuguese friend who's in Delft. This is a city of 10,000 people with jobs and transport and land uses, and you can play parameters, put policies and simulate it for 10 years. And you can do crazy policies. I'm now cutting the quality of life in this neighborhood to see what happens. And so these are technical people from different departments in Brasilia and in Guayaquil, planning departments, local and national, environmental departments, all of them playing with the city and seeing how you can do policy of, or create a policy pack, see the impacts, do policy of analysis. So if I take this policy, what should happen, and so on and so forth. So this is educational CPD kind of thing, to raise awareness of these tools. Of course, this is pedagogical, but some of my PhD students are designing things that soon could be applied to this, right? And finally, we'll finish ongoing research under this agenda, right? These are the cities that have research. There's Manchester here behind the thing. Explore further Guadalajara. I have a new project here in Moss side with using something called geodesign. It's starting tomorrow, really. Partnership with, I'm scaling it up finally. I reached the big guns, right? So because this is the National Mayors Federation of Brazil, which is the biggest association of mayors. So they represent 2/3 of the population, 75% of GDP, all the big cities. I'm meeting them next week, and we're constructing an agenda that allows me to have access to their practices and they will have my expertise to develop perhaps CPD training or guidelines for this and that. Cases are being developed in Colombia too, Portugal and Spain. I'm engaging with people there in the United Kingdom. And I'm clearly factoring this in my course because this is a relevant thing for me. And I'm now searching for funding. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. I know that's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, speaking as a social anthropologist, I'm interested in the bottom-up approach that you took in Brazil, and interested in how those local community groups could possibly have some input into the planning and decision-making process. I guess a couple of things caught my attention. One was that you seem to use the same tool, the MCA, multi-criteria analysis, for very different problems. So that was kind of interesting. To what extent is the decision support tailored or different for different kinds of problems, different kinds of organizations? And I guess the second thing is, I mean, if I guess, I'm assuming that when you go through a planning process, that at the beginning, when you're making all the decisions and everyone's sitting around and they're using all these tools, strategy, blah, 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 then it all comes out quite nicely. But then over the next, as we've seen with HS2, for example, 20 years, when you're trying to implement the thing, it all goes completely wrong because lots of other people come in with different agendas and they're changing the rules and then the money suddenly the whole budget escalates out of control. So I just wonder, to what extent did you encounter those kinds of things, that when you get 8 people in a room and you put them through the process of making these decisions and they come up with a nice solution, how does it, to what extent does that actually pan out and lead to good decisions when you actually come to implementation?
Thanks for the questions. That are good. First, the method, right? MCA is a method that verbalizes whatever.
Okay.
And makes a very simple mathematical formulation, which is these are the criteria normalized from 0 to 1, and then the stakeholders put the weights on the criteria, and then you add this. Very simple, and that's it.
Right.
So it's a perfect method to apply for. We do MCA when you buy a cell phone, right? Because it makes actuals and peers very well, and it's very simple on the method, and it's very simple to verbalize everything. That's the one. That's one thing. Second thing is quite good. So one of the worst thing of being a planner or whatever, I tell my students, right? A big chunk of your professional life will be doing things that will never be done. So get used to it from now. And they just is a good example. The planning processes increasingly more are, so since the 80s or even earlier, are community or should be community driven to some extent. Participation is very important. The UK is very important. Is very effective on participation. Other countries are more ticking boxes on participation. But this country is really effective. It's a cycling, it's a looped process, not a linear process as it was, say, in the 60s or 50s, in which I talked about perspective of a system that you could play with levers and all. So the way to do it is constantly monitoring, assessing, and applying, if necessary, again, thinking, right? That would perhaps relate just to, if you had done this more in this way, perhaps we would have scrapped it, we probably had a better technology, more efficient, etc., etc. But as you say, and that's pretty much the bottom of my interest, is generically speaking, from the community perspective, they usually don't have a voice, right? Interesting difference between São Paulo and Brasilia. Because in Brasilia, you end up knowing, especially these activists, right? You end up knowing a federal congressman or woman or someone. And because in Brazil, a congressman can, a congressperson can, has a budget of themselves, multi-million budget, they can issue calls. In Brasilia, they are much more capable of assessing funds, right? So they are more capacitated, they have a bit more voice. They don't have a voice in decisions, but they have channels to have more capacity. Whereas in São Paulo, for example, it's totally different. They are more community. And so one thing that I was keep saying to them is, we want you to give you a voice. Interestingly enough, I said to one collective job, right? This collective, I could say, is Nossa Brasilia. Nossa Brasilia is a collective that's into a big think tank on a certain side of the spectrum, right? And when they came to us, so they were way more capacitated than because they have technical people, economists, planners, architects, they have everyone, sociologists, but they have a very clear agenda. And they have my interpretation, because I propose them to analyze the metro and BRT. BRT is bus rapid transit. So it's those buses that operate like metros, right? That's a proposal, and I said let's look at the whole metropolitan area, all the corridors, and do again. It was a simple. I do this in one class, MCA, to see with limited resources, the budget, where should we go and put the money to guarantee less inequality. I don't say more inequality, right? And they said to me, no, we don't want to do that. We want you to compare this public investment, because the massive transport node, in this particular corridor, because we want you to show that public money was put on private cars of wealthier people, and not the corridor that will serve. We serve for an Altino, which is a very private city. And so this is to say, that's not such a committee, bottom committee group. It's a high qualified think tank, really. And they already have a voice somehow, but as the others don't. And so I saw those seeing the game, whereas the bigger one was the first one to say, oh, we want you to justify this, not otherwise. We don't want, the justification was, it's a fair argument. We don't want to be technocratic. And I said to them, this is not about being technocratic. It's about creating a little tool that you can speak with all these community groups that are asking for investment of infrastructure, but they don't have a voice for it. So here is something that could balance a bit the discussion of these poorer communities. And the other perception is technocratic.
Right.
But I think in a way, thank you for the call. Very, very interesting. I actually would like, I think, like some other people, which I don't know how MCA works. I probably would like a lesson on the MCA. I have to make my own decisions. I don't know, but I think it goes on the back of Peter's question in a way. First of all, is a lot of decision making has to do with personal issues. You yourself said somebody was in Germany, the other elsewhere. So there are all kinds of things that are to do with the context and very daily, etc., and how and of course with political decisions that are political and they are personal at the same time, and the HS2 is not far from that either. So how do the models play with that if they do? That's the first question. The second question is, I think it again goes in the back of one of the questions asked by Peter. If we think about particularly the Armazém do Campo, I mean, there is a history there in the MST which comes from comunidades eclesiais de base. These are people completely brought up in the Catholic Church, kind of far from left-wing Catholic Church organization. They're highly organized, incredibly capable of doing things, and it's fascinating how they were, wanting to use these tools and their ability to use it. But my question is, what about, do you learn from their decision making and adapt it to your models as well? Do those models change from looking at these people who actually have been making decisions quite well, for quite a long time? If those are the questions.
I'll start with the second question. So that's a good question. The method itself is a very simple thing. That if it's done in an independent way, gives the voice. So MCA is a good thing because it gives really the voice to whoever's in the process, right? And so my role when I was observing, have some recordings, was really to observe how they factor in their knowledge. So for example, in No Sector, very young collective in Brazil, they did 30 projects, and they know, because each one of the young people were doing the projects, so they know the costs and they know who they contact was. They know all this, but they don't have any record of this. So now in the second stage, the first thing we told them is, look, Here's this database. I created from this database. Populate this database about projects. Put all the information each one of you know about each project here in a single database that you can look and see, oh, collect your knowledge. And after that, you can go back to the method. And with the history knowledge on, I don't know, simple things like unit cost per hour of whatever for this place, or how many people can we engage in this particular, these kind of things that they know inside, they will do a much better application of the method. And this, again, a cycle of learning inside the institution. That's one thing I said to them. With MSc was interesting because they really want to go to this location of new shops. And we're talking about small things. A small little shop, and they don't have information inside. So they have, for example, very good information systems for what they sell. And they have the logistics of what they sell, how they optimize the supply of this rice, right? From all the cities. And this is a lot of knowledge that can lead them to know how and where to locate the smaller ones, to maximize warehouse space when they import a truck of rice, for example. That was one problem they were always saying in the past. They know the path of the rice very well. And they wanted now to follow this up to the small shops, to disseminate that to the product, but also to maximize the space they have in the back. So it's exactly what you're saying. The knowledge, what I was trying there on this little exercise, and if I scale this up, I'll keep doing this approach, is I won't tell them anything about the problem. I don't have anything to do with this. It's their perspective, their knowledge, their interest, their expectation. I provide a method that doesn't have, in all the steps that the prompts I have in each step, doesn't have anything with the problem. It's always a very, what should I say, doesn't have anything that induces them to think this or that. It's just a question. About this, what's your criteria? And they design this. So the idea is to design a toolkit in which, for example, MCA will be very exempt of any bias. But then this is one method. There are other methods, for example, cost-benefit analysis, which is highly debatable, right? But it's very important because, for example, EU doesn't fund any project of any scale without the cost-benefit analysis associated with it, right? There are alternative methods, but if EU does it, perhaps we need to know a bit, and also we need to know the limits, the critics. That's the same. And the first question was about.
It was just the role of personal.
Oh, the person, yeah. And that's another thing. We are all humans. All stages, from the citizen to the counselor to the chief exec, they all are humans. None of them need to have any knowledge. So a counselor doesn't have to have a technical knowledge of this. He needs to be able to listen to evidence or information and then decide. He's elected to decide. And we have to leave this political level as it is, a political level. Otherwise, we fall into optimization of systems, which could work, right? Could work in principle because we have very good knowledge to optimize the traffic, right? Or even the project by HS2, you could very coldly analyze the project and say yes or no. But this is a political decision. So my idea in developing these approaches, even if I use other methods, for example, on the toolkit I was proposing, it worked also with what I did and students are doing, an agent-based simulation model. The agent-based simulation model is a simulation model like a game, in which we simulate an individual, a family, a car, company. And you put it, let's call it intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. You put knowledge into the decision-making of these agents in every activities they have. You need to construct this in a non-biased way. And be transparent. So the user picks up a method and say, okay, this method is okay, it's sufficiently open and transferable, so I can use it. There's a very famous example of models, which is traffic models again. The US had this highway capacity manual, very thick book of technical analysis of how to land use transport interactions, how many trips you generate on the building like this or shopping center. And because they do this since the 50s or something, this is a very mature piece of knowledge that was used in many other countries as a model to implement very objective traffic systems. The problem is that, as you probably know, in the US, you drive differently from here. Everyone drives very higher speed, but in a very uniform way. There's the profile of speed is very uniform. Ours is totally different. Cars are totally different. So that transposition, and this is a technical example, but could be applied to perspectives, right? Individual, political, ideological perspective. When you transfer, they're out of context and they don't really deliver what they should. And so I believe that all these methods are to be something that could be transferable as independent as they can be. And context free. One reason, so in my classes, I don't use real case studies. I use mock reality. So I have synthetic data, synthetic cities, and case studies that I generate myself, and students operate the methods over these conceptual things because I want them to think on the concepts of the methods without thinking about Manchester, right? And so they can easily transfer these to other cities. The bias you mentioned is the bias of you trained in Manchester, right? Terrace house, things both side and southward, and this you go to a Brazilian city, it's totally different, right? If you know the concepts more than the cases that you learn, bottom line is I try to take out spatial biases or context biases.
Is there in the chat? Yeah, a question from a person called Ember, but there are many comments, so maybe Ember, if you are listening, you can ask the question yourself, unmute.
Well, yeah, I'm listening, but I'm not sure if you can listen to me well.
You can.
There is some kind of noise here, but anyway. Well, I really appreciate your presentation. I think it's very thoughtful and very relevant for our countries. I live in Peru, in Lima, and I was myself for a long time a policymaker. So I can say from my experience that there is a lot of hindrances here in order to embrace new approaches, new technologies, new knowledge. And the biggest of all of them is that the bureaucrats, they like to be ignorant because they are very comfortable in this status quo. By being ignorant, it's easy for them to work this way because they are not paid by their results, the outcomes, only by the time that they engage into office. So they climb the ladder, they get better paid jobs, they get better offices, just because they stay there, not because what they bring to the people, to the users, to the population. Because it's one thing that prevents any progress in the public administration. So what you are presenting is very thoughtful, but I think it's going against very strong perverse incentives that they are well placed in the public administration in our countries. I'm talking about Peru, but also Colombia, Mexico, probably Chile is an exception to some extent, but in most of our countries is the same. And I have been working and living there, so I know what I'm talking about. And well, related to this observation is that these things have been studied for a long time by two economic branches. One is collective action. It's coming from the 60s, 70s, actually. And the other is public choice theory. So public choice theory is more focusing on the wrong incentives that bureaucrats have in order to not to do the right thing, right? So exactly what I'm depicting now. But collective action talks about what people do in order to provide themselves with the services that they need. So they organize themselves in something like a club, interest groups, and so forth. So they promote the agenda in different ways by voting sometimes, but passing some initiatives to the legislative body or just exerting pressure in the press or other mechanisms towards the right people in power. So there's different mechanisms, but the principles are the same. So my question here is, if you have taken into account what I'm saying about the context in the bureaucratic administration of our countries, first of all, and second, if you are aware of these theoretical approaches, and maybe you can probably incorporate their insights into your research agenda. So thank you.
Right, just a quick answer. There are not questions over there, so but it's a good comment. I see your point. I agree that this is old knowledge. In fact, the first thing I tell my students is this is pretty much very old knowledge. We just have better tools to implement some of this knowledge. That what you're mentioning is really part of what I said, the crystallization of the professional practice at several levels, right? And you mentioned the political level, I assume. But also the public service kind of level. And I agree, there's lots of barriers ingrained in public service all over, not only Latin America, in Portugal. For example, in Portugal, the National Association of Municipalities has a foundation for training people in local authorities. The majority of training they do is on procurement, HR, and the legal aspects of civil service. They don't really do training on technical aspects of all the different domains, social security, education, planning, transport, or whatever the local authorities have as competencies, which are increasingly more as we go. So there's a big frustration from, I think, the civil service that works in some of these countries, because they would, when these colleagues come to my workshops, they are really engaged with it, because it's kind of a mind-opening kind of thing with these little models and exercises. They see the point of retraining themselves into this knowledge and new methods. So my fight will be to make a case that the knowledge is sufficiently robust to justify it. The detachment between, so that the outcomes of current decision making are a bit flawed. Let's have lots of examples of flawed decisions away from evidence. And everything contributes to us to have better qualification of stakeholders in general. And this is supported by theoretical frameworks, as you mentioned. There were three questions.
This is sort of similar to the question asked earlier, but I know that, you're saying that you're caring about giving them the tools to use their own knowledge, but also I work with squatters, and I know that these activist systems share a lot of knowledge between themselves. For instance, like I worked with the LA Tenants Union, who drew a lot from the MST and also PA in Barcelona. And these activist networks share a lot of information about how they make decisions collectively, distributed across large amounts of space. For instance, the MST all across Brazil, coordinated action. And then on the other hand, policymakers tend to share their information at conferences, spaces like that. That's why bus rapid transit is so prolific now, because it was sort of the technology policy idea for a while. So what I'm wondering is, it sounds like you're equipping these activist spaces with the tools that they need to translate those needs into the language of policymakers and policy spaces. If you show them this method, they can say, here's a mathematical weighting to what we need funding for. But is there, not necessarily in your research, but if you know of, is there any attempts on the policymaking side to learn from not just the knowledge that they're making decisions about, but the forms of decision-making processes that they've developed from the ground up in terms of how they already coordinate using different methods that might be not just bottom-up knowledge translated into a policy perspective, but activist-based sort of non-hierarchical decision-making processes that aren't sort of the same as where we're saying, we're going to open it up to participatory experience, but you need to translate it into the terms of your understanding.
You ask, to take my question, policymakers, higher level, institutional levels are learning from the activists and how they engage with themselves and how they build the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
It's not the scope of my part. So my counterpart in Brazil, in Brasilia, they are interested in coupling with this analysis, the network component, because that's the core research.
Yeah.
My simple answer is no one in Brazil, probably Portugal, FCA, no one really cares from or much, right? it might be too much, but they care less than we hope we care about it. And so also because when many activists, it's my observation, but many activist groups and all, when they start gaining capacity, they politicize so much that they lose the capacity to keep going. I remember in Brazil, the Uber Association of Uber drivers. In Brazil, Uber came to some extent to solve the problem of illegal transport, because there's lots of illegal plans that you stop and go, there's no insurance and nothing, right? And Uber, and a small part of the people who travel on a daily basis solve that problem. And they could pay also Uber, but of course, it doesn't solve the problem for lower income families, right? Still use the illegal private transport. And then I tried to contact for another paper. There's a guy who came from Greenland as the leader of the association. And then every time I took the Uber, I was reviewing informally, what about this guy? And the majority of them said, oh, the guy now is just, you can find him in the airport where he stops, but he just follows. You don't have who you are because he went too political, some other agenda. So to answer your question, I think we are living difficult times these days. 30 years ago, the system was more stable, more trusted in psychology. So they would learn a bit more. The knowledge was stored somehow. Nowadays, in the fast pace, I'm not sure if you have this notion, but on the local authority in Manchester, the logic is we are working now the next 6 months towards that application for that government fund for this project. You submit this, next day the team goes and goes for the next application. There's no time for you to invite them to sit for 2 hours and have a discussion. What do you want to do? What are the strategic thinking? How do you see it? And everyone everywhere in the public administration at the local authority level, but I would assume also at the government level, are working in this fast pace of funding treadmills, competitive approach to funding. And that's very bad.
So we're due to sound cost 6:30. So maybe we can have Natalia's part of the question that Natalia like to use. I was wondering if variables such as violence or perceptions of insecurity are applications of cognitive, grassroots organizations and networks of stakeholders engaged in the process of governance in cities such as
It's interesting. In Brazil, for example, you said the second time I was there now, this time I'm working with them, things changed dramatically. The DF government, which runs the whole city, right, decided that the Setor Comercial Sul is a prime land for. So they come with the traditional ways, creative industries and all, but it's not exactly creative industries. Stop around real estate coming to try to take over those empty buildings. I'm not sure if you've been there, but the Comercial is very developed. Buildings are empty to some extent, offices are not offices. The amount of homeless people is very, very big. So the government now wants to embellish it. So there's an embellishment approach. The whole main square of the sector is now redesigned. The counterpart of this is the homeless people are being kicked out to the back streets or outside. And the sector told me the guy announced the reason because now we're fighting the government who came back after the 6 years, 6 months period of in January, and they are amassing this real estate interest kind of thing and say this is prime development or we furnish them, and they will be kicked out. So this is to say that those and this implies a bit of violence because police has operated some violence on homeless people as in many other cases. So yes, you could factor that in. With MSC we did it. So in MSC one criteria was the amount of political engagement one neighborhood would have to place together shop. How we measure this, I don't know, number of events you organize in the shop, but they organize political events in the shops, right? Number of events you organize in the shop, the violence would be a number of crimes of certain types, street crime, mugging or whatever associated with a given activity that is linked to, I don't know, homeless people living in or the other way around, police operating in people in places where have many homeless cities. We can measure anything, right? I usually say cost benefit analysis. We reduce everything to money, right? Including human lives. And there's lots of I usually say a Portuguese citizen is less worth than a German citizen because we are less productive. So if one of us die, the GDP produced in the remaining life of the German is much higher than the Portuguese. So insurance company will pay more for the German than you pay for the Portuguese. And this is shocking. It's one of the things, but it's crude analysis of things. We can measure pretty much anything, including violence. There are metrics for this also. Right? There are studies in violence that give us metrics that we can then correlate to it. Right?
Okay, so if those problems come to stand, I'll ask if there are other questions.
I'm available by email, so if you want to drop by an email, drop an email.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm just, oh,
It's still, if you want to keep that email from that in there.
Yeah,
I made a note, so I can,
can you forward it?
it'll be
Yeah, okay.
saved in the
It's easier.
chat, won't it?
you can hold that, yeah.
But it will be automatically saved in the chat, won't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be. So we can send you a copy of
Yeah,
the comment.
oh yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just, actually, if you look, we can probably save the chat on to.
Go quickly to my office.
Okay, okay. Fine.
I'll take a picture.
No,
For the email at least.
yeah, okay. It'll be, okay, it'll be saved onto your desktop.
All right,
I like.
I can share this with you then.
Now,
You want me to share it?
Still quite like.
hold on.
You
Blah,
might
blah.
have like. these people come in and they still have to-
You know, it's to upload it.
Ah.
Perhaps it's here. Close it. No,
That is to
not-
upload, okay.
Probably. Safe chats, there we go. Portuñol.
Soy de Guadalajara.
¿Así?
Sí,